Good afternoon, everyone. I opted to work really hard on all my clerical stuff this morning and do some streaming this afternoon. I thought I'd do something a little different today. I have some inked drawings to paint as well, but I thought we would work on a little bit more of my traditional watercolor method today on this Coatl dragon. Coatls are South American kind of tropical dragons. This one's going to be super tropical themed because my new book that I'm working on art for is about drink themed dragons, alcohol and non alcoholic. And I want to do something that represents kind of tropical drinks like pina coladas. And I thought it'd be cool to do a Coatl dragon for that. So it's kind of like a wyvern. It doesn't usually have limbs, though in this case I am giving it hands and arms. But it is a feathered dragon, and we're going to paint it in sort of pineapple and cherry and sunset colors. So lots of yellows, very cheery yellows, oranges, reds, and pinks. So it should be really pretty. And what I have here is a sketch that I've done. It's fairly detailed. And in some places it's a little too dark, so I'm going to use a kneaded eraser. And rather than scrub it, which would completely erase it, I'm just going to push down and twist ever so slightly on the areas that are a little too dark in pencil. And all that does is lightens my pencil, but it's still there. So I'm going to do that to begin with. And kind of tap it on here just to lighten up some of this so the pencil will still be there as a guideline for me, but won't be quite as obvious. So I've done that on the face. I'll do that a little on the hands. A lot of this I did draw kind of lighter. Many of my other videos, I do use ink, either with a brush or a pen, and either do a coloring book page or make a copy of it and then add color. But in this case, I'm just going to do a very traditional watercolor only painting. So I'm just kind of lightening up my whole sketch here a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is really kind of translate my very light sketch of my dragon here into watercolor. And since I know this is going to be tropical colors, I'm going to use like a pretty bright yellow color, and I'm just going to use a very small brush and start outlining my dragon. I'm basically tracing over my pencil lines in yellow. I'm creating a new line drawing that's in watercolor. And then once that has dried, I will be able to really erase a lot more of my pencil. And I may use a couple different colors for this line drawing. I'm going to start it out with yellow for the face here. And I think what we'll do is zoom this up a bit, or even I'll probably just bring the camera down a little if I can here for you guys. So you can see it a little bit better while I'm working on it. There we go. I find that works a little better than zooming in sometimes because you get a higher res look at a close-up. So I'm just coming in here with all my fun yellowy color. I'm hoping everybody's having a good day. As I said, I was doing a ton of clerical stuff. I was getting surveys ready for Kickstarter backers and pre-orders ready. So now you can pre-order my latest coloring stuff, latest coloring stickers, coloring book, all kinds of other goodies. And I'm super happy I get to do a bunch of mini coloring books with the project I'm working on now. So that's all in the works as well. So as you can see, I'm already kind of getting the shapes there. Probably just a little bit of a darker gold to outline some of the eyes. I'm using a pretty fine brush because I want to capture a lot of detail. This is one of my smallest brushes. I think there's one size smaller than this, which is the 20-0, but this is the 10-0. It's the one I use most commonly for details and things like that. And I'm just trying to translate what is a pencil drawing that's pretty light into a watercolor kind of drawing or outline that'll be all set for more detailed painting. And I'm hoping we'll get some people who want to stop by and hang out and chat. But if not, you guys can always play this video back later. For anyone watching the video who hasn't met me, my name is Jessica Feinberg. I am an illustrator and also an author, and technically also a small business owner, so that's a lot. And I'm currently residing in Tucson, Arizona, where it is nice and sunny. Actually had to pull my curtains to try to control the lighting a bit in here so that you guys could see what I was doing. I think I gave this guy, it's a little bit of a cuter face because he has a blunter nose, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of like the kind of faces you would give dinosaurs, or like a T-Rex or a Velociraptor. I love those sorts of lizardy faces. So I do study a lot of dinosaurs. I also study a lot of real lizards and all sorts of other animals, especially when it comes to things like the Coatl dragons are feathered, so there's going to be a lot of feathers in this picture, which I'm sure I will get frustrated with after a while. And unlike some of my other Coatl dragons, I'm also giving this guy horns. So you are going to see the horn on this side, which is right here. And the cool thing about this is it gives me basically an entire line drawing in a pretty light color, so I can blend it in with my paint. And depending on what the finished colors are going to be, you might use different colors for this line drawing. And this gives you a lot more control than if you were just to start doing watercolor over big areas. Sometimes if I have a more simple picture and it has a really clean pencil drawing, I'll just go right to doing like big areas of watercolor and not worry about these sorts of detailed line drawings. But for this project, I really want the watercolor line drawing I'm doing to act as a sort of a border or a barrier. So that means that it'll help control the paint that I put inside each of these sections. So I'm going to continue that on down. It's looking pretty good. I never know the best time of day to stream, so I try to vary it because I know I have people who tune in different time zones and things like that. So I don't know if we'll get anybody in here today, but I have to do this work anyway, so I might as well stream it, and then it's company for people who happen to come across it or tune in later and play it back. It's a little weird when you sit there and talk to yourself, but I think it's even weirder to paint totally quiet in a video, so I'm usually just rambling a little bit about life and the universe and my process of creating things. And this is one of my favorite types of dragons to paint because they tend to be really colorful, really fun, and I don't think I've done one on my Twitch stream before. I've been streaming for coming up on 3 weeks. I did other types of videos before that on YouTube, and I'm planning to save these videos and upload them there as well. And what sort of creatures I create very much comes from my awesome Patreon subscribers. They're people who pay a monthly fee. Sometimes it's just $1 a month, sometimes it's $5 or more. But even the folks who pay $1 a month, which is $12 a year, they get to make requests for what I'll create. They get to vote on my own ideas. And this particular one, I really wanted to do basically like a Pina Colada themed dragon, as weird as that sounds. So I'm going for something a little more serious and realistic. Sometimes I do really cartoony dragons. This guy's going to be a little more serious. And it's important that in this kind of process where you are kind of transferring your pencil lines into watercolor, that before you erase it, you make sure your pencil lines are super dry. So I have to kind of wait on those just to be sure that they're really dry. And he's going to have these awesome huge feathers up here. It should be really fun. And he's basically going to be all shades of yellow. We'll leave some of him a lot whiter, almost white, and then we'll add some pinks and probably some reds. Because I feel like when you get pina coladas, they always, or other tropical drinks, they always have like cherries and stuff in them. So I kind of want to work that into the idea too. This is not an exact science. I don't always have everything perfect in the pencil drawing. This was a pretty quick pencil drawing, so I just know kind of generally what I want to do. And sometimes when I have done enough to kind of move away from the face, I can switch to a bigger brush if I have one. Let's see how this guy will work. And I mention this a lot, but I try to use the most detail in the areas that are the focal points for my pieces. So since the focal point is the face, I'm going to do a lot of detail there, and then some of the rest of this will be less detailed, so I don't need to use as small a brush to kind of trace the details because they're a little more simple and broad. So now that the face is dry, we can go back while some of the rest of this is drying and really erase that. And again, I'm using a kneaded eraser. It's kind of a very rubbery eraser. This is just a little piece of one. I tend to kind of tear mine up into pieces that are useful sizes because sometimes they come in kind of very big squares and they tend to get dried out or eventually they turn too dark from picking up too much pencil graphite in them. And you don't need a very big piece to do this, so that way they stretch farther, they last longer. And it's very gentle eraser, so it won't damage my watercolor or my watercolor paper, which is important. You definitely don't want to get scratches in your paper or your paint won't behave correctly. So it's important that you don't press too hard with pencil or have an eraser that can scratch it too badly. So now we have a drawing that is in watercolor just for his head, where I've already kind of cleaned it up a bit. And I think we'll work on some of the details there just in case we don't finish this whole piece so that the video doesn't get too boring with me just tracing things the whole time. So one of the first things I'm going to do is blend some of the color I already have there. So I just use a fairly, like a larger brush that's a fairly thicker end on it and get a little water on it. And it's just water, and I can kind of scrub at the lines I already created, and I can blend those in on any edges I want to make it softer. And right now I'm just blending their inside edges because I want the outside to have a really sharp, clean look, but I want to blend the inside a little bit here just to create kind of the basic shapes and stuff for this dragon. Again, I'm not adding any paint, but because I've already got some there, it's pretty easy for me to just scrub it around a little bit and soften it up. Some people like round brushes for this. I usually use round brushes for most things. I don't have a lot of square-ended brushes or weird shapes for doing my watercolor. I don't really I mean, I own some, but I don't use them very often. So on the face, I'm going to lay the face very, very light and just blend some of my yellow out to create shading. But I'm not planning on adding a lot more yellow or gold or anything here. I think it'd be cool if his face stays pretty light for the main color, and then we'll just add more colors for some of the highlights and other things that are happening here. But you can see there's already a lot of depth happening there, and I'm trying to make sure that my light isn't so harsh that you can't see the details. And see how fast it is to get, even with just one color on here, dimension appearing. And I think his stomach here is going to be pretty light as well. And then I'll work into some darker colors kind of on his back. So while that's drying, I'll go back to my smaller brush, but not my teeny tiny brush. That's kind of the medium size one. This one is a size 2, I think. A size 1 or 2, which are good for little details, but not the super fine stuff. I'm just going to keep outlining some of the rest of this. It's pretty quiet out there today. I've seen a couple people kind of pop in and out. So this part is the wing that's behind him. It's his other wing. We're just going to probably put kind of a general shadow shape for it here. It's not going to be as detailed because I want his wing that's closer and his face to really stand out. So things in the distance, in real life you can sometimes see a lot more detail in them, but when you're doing creature designs, if there's a wing or arms or legs that are farther away, it is often better to just sort of outline them and suggest them without adding too much detail. Right now this is all very light. And I figured this would be a great example piece because that's a type of dragon I have not painted on a stream before. And it's also one of the lightest pieces I've done because it's going to have some darker colors added, but it's definitely going to have some areas that are just sort of almost white or very light yellow. Thinking about what pineapple colors look like, that's kind of what I'm going for this guy. Okay, so now the face is dry again. I go back to my smallest brush. And I'm going to start to think about what I want to do for the eye here and some of that stuff. And I wish I could get my lighting a little bit better here. It's driving me nuts. I tried pulling the curtains, but I think that's actually making it worse. So I'm going to try going back to something with them open and a more natural lighting. I don't know if that's better. I hope so. Okay, and I'll try to zoom us up a little bit on his face. There we go. So we can really see what I'm doing here. So I think I want to introduce some like reddish orange colors in. So I'm just going to start on this area around his eye here. It's not a full red that I'm using. I think it is, I want to say it's a weird sienna color that Daniel Smith makes. And most of the colors I use are Koi or Shinhan colors, but I have a few Daniel Smith colors that I like that are a little more glowy. I'm just going to start building little details in here. And we're going to need to make his eye stand out a bit more. And I'm having a debate as to what color his actual eyeball is going to be. I'd like him to stand out from the rest of the piece, but I don't want to make it too glaring. This is where having a very small brush is pretty handy. There we go. So I think I'm going to start with a color that is just called yellow green. And I'm going to put that over his entire eye here and let it dry. Then I'll go back in and I'll add some detail to it. I think I'm going to take some of this same reddish color and do a little more of an outline on a few places here. I want things to stand out because I don't want him to blend in totally with the background, but I also don't want him to be a really dark colored dragon, at least on his face, because I'm saving a lot of the brighter reds and stuff for the feathers on the back of the head that we're going to do. And watercolor, because it's transparent, is all about just building layers of color, and you want to do it gradually. I mean, you don't want to take forever, but you want to do it gradually so you're not too heavy-handed and you don't go too dark too fast. I'm just going to use a little bit of lemon yellow and blend that in and around this area of the face here. Just to get some more yellow in there. And right now he looks kind of soulless because he just has a green eyeball, because you can barely see my pencil line for the pupil. It's there, it's just really light, because I kind of know where I'm going to put it. As I said, I do the most detail on the faces, so I use the smallest brushes here and really get in there and work on all the little subtle shapes. And then I'll go to bigger brushes for more of the details as we kind of move out from there. Because the details on the rest of this piece aren't as crucial as these ones. And sometimes I'll put teeth showing on my dragons, but I don't really think this guy needs teeth showing necessarily. What I am going to do is kind of darken this lower jaw just a bit, because there's going to be some shadow falling on it from the upper jaw, because I tend to give my dragons a little bit of an overbite. Usually you do an overbite or an underbite for dragons and lizards, versus making their bite meet perfectly. It gives them a little more personality. There we go. So now hopefully my eye is dry, and I'm just going to use a little bit of cerulean blue to shade in on top of the green I already put there. There we go. And then once that's dry, the very last thing I will do is I'll add the eyeball, and then I'll add the highlight. Goes with that. So he's looking pretty good so far. Got some personality. I always care about that a bit. And I want to use a little bit of, I've used a lot of like orange and orangey sort of reds and yellows. I want to use a little bit of pink as well. And when you put the pink over the yellow, it's going to become redder because you're mixing those two things. So it'll be good for doing some blends in here. And I use a pink color a lot called Opera. I have no idea why it's called Opera. I'm sure there's a reason behind it, because I'm not sure why pink relates to the opera at all, or if it's some entirely other meaning of the word opera. I've always wondered that. And I'm just going to use it to start to build out my feathers here. really pretty. So these are going to be sort of sunset-esque colors, I guess, that I'm using on him. And you can see when you don't use a pencil outline, you can see how soft you can kind of get, and natural you can get shapes to look, or when you don't use an ink outline, I should say, or leave a lot of pencil showing, you can get these pretty soft shapes in here. And I think they make for a really cool sort of feel. Just don't know why it keeps adjusting every time I'm painting, kind of auto adjusting the lighting, and we'll see. Is that better? We'll see if it holds that a little more. That's a little better, I think. I'm actually just going to pull the brightness down a little bit so you guys can see it a little better for the details. It's really hard when I'm painting light things to really show the details without making everything else look too dark. Because for a lot of my creative process, the colors are very light. Yeah, I don't know why it keeps doing that. Every time I like move my hand, I feel like it goes dark to light. I don't know. It's just a weird thing my camera is doing. Pretty sure my camera has a mind of its own. I have given up trying to understand it because I've messed with all the settings. And there's no auto light adjustments on or anything, so it shouldn't be doing that. And yet it still is. All right. I think it would be neat if he has kind of a yellow face and then he has these reds and pinks. And it might go into a kind of teal blue color for the top of the feathers. So, and I know I have some details I'm kind of painting over here that I'm going to add back in a couple minutes. Adding a little more yellow. The trick also with watercolor is not to rush it. Things have to have time to dry. Details can be time consuming. So if you're somebody who gets impatient a lot, find ways to entertain yourself. Have multiple pictures that you're working on. Or listen to audiobooks. Or TV. Or talk to people on Twitch. That works too. Introducing a little pink on the nose. I like how that guy looks. I think he's cute. Decided I would take this a little more into orangier color here. But again, I want to leave a lot of this light, so I'm trying not to overdo the face too much. Just blending some of this in. Maybe come with a little bit of red here. Pretty happy with that. And then I thought it would be neat to see if this works. To use some of this really nice cerulean blue. It's very teal looking in color. And what I'm doing is I'm starting at the tips of the feathers and I'm using a lot more paint here so that it's a more intense color. And then I'm going to rinse my brush, which is a little water on the brush. I'm just going to blend that down so that the colors blend, but it's not getting too much teal color lower down. I'm just blending it till it looks pretty natural. And I'll probably go in and put some feather texture in here a little bit too. So yeah, I think he's pretty cute so far. He's getting there. All right, so now my eye is dry again, and now I'm going to use a really small brush and a pretty dark blue. And I'm just going to add in a line for the pupil and a little bit around the top because the eyelid actually creates a shadow there. Ta-da! The very last thing I'll do is add a highlight, but I can't do that quite yet because he's got to dry again. Otherwise, my highlight would smudge all that up. I kind of like the idea that he's kind of this yellowish dragon, but he has these little bits of pinker color here. So I'm going to work on this. I'm trying to make him a little darker here because I want to put highlights on the nose too, and they need to stand out on top of that. And I use white acrylic ink for my highlights. You can also use things like gel pen, but the issue is that with gel pen you can end up smudging your gel pen, which is not a good thing, or wanting to make changes later and it's not waterproof. So sometimes I use white pen if I'm sure it's the very last thing I'm doing, but I tend to use white ink from a bottle and a brush a bit more. Some people also use white pencil, but I don't tend to use colored pencil as much on my watercolor. I see we got a couple people in the chat. That's cool. If you guys are just watching, that's cool. If you have questions or comments, I am happy to answer them in the chat. I try to keep a general eye on it while I'm painting. I think he's already really kind of cool looking though. I think it would also mean if I kind of give him some tribal markings, so once his face is really dry, I'm going to kind of go in there and do that. I'm already going to do some designs with my teal right here because they'll stand out a little bit better. And if you've never used watercolor or you're using different paints than you've normally used, I recommend getting a piece of paper that's the same paper you're painting on. It's a scrap one, and just testing what colors look like on top of each other, making sure that when you do this, they're gonna come out okay. There we go. Okay, zoom us back out a little bit so we can see more of him. Oh, thank you. It's nice to know what I'm doing is relaxing. And I'm hoping I end up encouraging at least a few people to eventually try watercolor. I know I tried it a few times and was not good at it, and it took me a while to find the kind of paper and paint and things that worked well for me, which is why I'm always happy to share that information, because paint can be really different depending on the brand of paint and what sort of paper, whether it's hot press or cold press or smooth. This guy's gonna make me want a tropical drink though. I was in a chat for our steampunk society. The gal who runs it also has a Patreon that I subscribe to, and she's been holding some Facebook live chats for most of the time since the quarantine started. I think she was doing them before that, but she's doing them a lot more often. And she was talking about when this is over, a bunch of us going to get tropical drinks, which sounds really awesome. So, of course, now I'm painting a tropical dragon, and it's making me hungry. And I actually took, I want to say it was a colored pencil workshop that I took on drawing feathers. And if you've never drawn feathers, you need to kind of look at what their shapes are and stuff like that, because it definitely helps you learn to do things like this where they look a little more realistic. I wish I could get it to stop doing that light to dark adjustment that it's doing. I don't know why it's doing that. Try resetting this and see if it's a little better. There we go. I think that helped a bit. I'm going to zoom this the rest of the way back out. There we go. I don't know, I think I channel a little bit of dinosaur with a lot of my dragons. And any place where I really want stuff to stand out, I'm going to come in here with just a little bit of my same teal blue and kind of outline it. That'll make it stand out a little more without kind of being a black outline. I don't want to go too harsh with those colors. So the most famous of this type of dragon, of Coatl dragons most people know about, is Coatl, and there's an Aztec and a Mayan version. They have slightly different names, I believe, which are these feathered serpent gods, which are types of Coatls, but this type of dragon appears in a lot of games and stuff like that. So right now I feel like that's too dark what I added, but it's easy enough for me to just take a little bit of water and soften it up. And if I still feel like it's too much, I can, while it's damp, I can take a paper towel and just very carefully blot some of that out. So I can always lighten it this way and then blot it slightly, and it'll just soften it back up if it's too much. There's all kinds of tricks with watercolor. Some people use natural sea sponges with their paint to remove stuff or do texture. I've used makeup sponges before. There's all kinds of weird tricks you can do. Some people use saran wrap where you put it onto wet paint and crinkle it and let it dry. And when you peel it off, it leaves a weird crinkly texture. There's so much stuff you can do. One of these videos I will demonstrate using salt with watercolor. The issue is it has a very long dry time. So I think we'd have to work on two pieces, and at the beginning do a background and salt on one, and then leave it or show it at a future video when it had dried. Yeah, I think these are sort of the colors I think of for tropical drinks. Trying to get the saturation on the computer to match. There we go. So I like it to try to look as close to what I'm painting as possible. I'm just going to keep repeating the process. I'm going to keep adding some teal colors up here, and I may go back in places I've already added them and just darken the edge a little bit. And if you get frustrated with painting that you can't get fine details and things, you might not be on the right type of paper, or you might just need a lot more practice with a very small brush, because a lot of it's sort of like when you're learning to draw with a pencil. It just takes time to learn to make shapes and details, and drawing with a brush is essentially what I'm doing almost more than painting, and that also takes a little bit of time to get used to. You get like a level of dexterity and control if you have just done painting after painting year after year after year. I've been using watercolor in this way for, gosh, 12 or 13 years. And when I started out, I would get frustrated super easily. So I made it my goal to do at least one small painting every weekend. And after I did enough small paintings, I felt more comfortable transitioning to some larger ones and eventually starting to sell my work and do some more serious stuff. I'd drawn and painted in other types of media before that. But it took me, I feel like, a year to really be comfortable with the control of watercolor, when to control things, when to let them go. Look at this happy little guy. A little more light. Sometimes I feel like if I get too much light on here, the contrast ends up all over the place too, but hopefully you guys can see how pretty he is. I could probably make my light a little bit brighter. I actually have an awesome light that is, there we go. It's a bar versus a spotlight. So it lights a pretty wide area very evenly. It's really great for painting when you have low light or painting at night. And it has brightness dimmer adjustment on it, so you can control how bright it is. And then it has several different temperatures of light. So we'll do a natural light, a kind of an indoor light that's more yellow, a kind of a bluer light. So you can kind of set it to whatever works best for you, whether you're using it to read a book or paint a picture. And it's a USB light, so it can plug into the wall with a USB plug or your computer and be powered off of those things. And it was not expensive, which I think is awesome. I feel like drawing lights used to be killer expensive, and now they're quite a bit more reasonable than they used to be. Let's see if I can get this at a better angle. I'm always trying to adjust it a little bit so you guys can see better, but I think that kind of shows him pretty well. And I'm going to go ahead and, while that's drying, I'm going to outline a bit more on the wings here. And I'm going to do that same sort of pattern for not every feather on the wing. That sort of transition will go kind of across the whole wing. So these feathers here will probably end up having some like yellow and teal, and the earlier ones will have more of the reds and sunset colors. This guy is going to be very pretty. I've actually done a couple of Coatls recently. I haven't done them on camera though, so I'm happy to do that here. But I did one, I feel like it was a little over a month ago. And while this one kind of represents more tropical colors like Pina Colada drinks and stuff like that, the one that I did last month, there we go. It kind of represents chocolate, as weird as it sounds, because a lot of cacao and chocolate was discovered and used by South Americans historically. So I thought it would be cool to have kind of a South American cacao dragon. And not all of my creatures are food or drink themed, but since the next field guide I'm doing is beverage themed, I'm trying to include things that represent coffee and tea and tropical drinks like pina coladas and stuff like that. So it's really fun. I love drawing coffee and tea dragons. I tend to make my coffee dragons look very possessive of the coffee in question, which is kind of funny. Since I know I'm going to use those kind of pinker colors for some of this, I'm actually just going to use them to trace my pencil drawings here. And I think it's difficult. You can do it digitally and you can kind of do it with marker, but I think it's most easy to get these like beautiful glowing colors either in digital paint or with watercolor, because it is a transparent paint and you can build your colors slowly and let so much white kind of show through that it gets like these beautiful glowing looks like the face has on mine. I know we have a couple people watching and you guys are just relaxing, which is cool. I'm happy I can help with that. But everybody's hanging in there. I know people are getting more and more stir crazy, and I'm actually a little weirded out by the fact that I'm alone today. Not because I mind being alone. I'm kind of used to spending a good amount of time alone, but for the last 3 weeks, either for the fact that, well, Daniel took time off, my boyfriend, to help me at Festival of Books, which then got canceled, but he'd already put in for the time off. And then it hit his normal days off. So we had 4 or 5 days off there. Then he went back to work for, I want to say, 2 days. And then we got a cold and took a couple days off. And then right when he was supposed to go back to work again, we actually got pretty sick. Not super sick, but we had fevers, just mild ones, and we were really tired, which I know is a sign of the virus everyone's worried about. So we called ahead. We went to urgent care. We got checked out. They basically told us it's a virus. It could easily be a mild version of the virus that we're worried about, or it could be a really similar one. But because it was so similar, they said do the full quarantine procedure. So we did that. So we've been well for a bit now, but then he was supposed to go back to work 4 or 5 days ago because we had the 2 weeks, and then he got sick again. And I was like, what the heck? How are you sick again? We took him back to urgent care, and he'd actually had the remnants of whatever we had plus allergies turn into a sinus infection. So he's been on antibiotics for that. I feel so bad that he's been sick so much. So now he's back at work today, finally. But it's been weird because, normally he's here a couple of days a week all day, and then the rest of the time he's here part of the time, and then at work part of the time. But he's been home for at least 3.5 weeks, really, or close to, maybe one day at work in there somewhere. So it's really weird that he's suddenly back at work. It's weirding me out a little bit because I just got used to him always kind of being here, watching TV, playing video games, or working on stuff that he needed to do for himself. So, and he's awesome. He actually helps me keep the house clean. I don't even have to ask. I think he likes cleaning, which is really cool. I haven't had that in a relationship before. I'm so used to kind of doing everything, whether it's living with family or boyfriends in the past. I've just sort of always done all the household stuff. So it's been really nice having the help with that, but it's a little weird and quiet suddenly after 3 weeks of not being alone at all to have that. So I do have a bunch of kitties here. They're in the other room. I thought I was going to leave the door open today, but as soon as I got my paints out, the kitten climbed up here and started headbutting the camera before I even started streaming. So I decided that was not good. So I'm just placing all the feathers in here. I think it's looking pretty good. It just takes time, and when this is all dry, I can erase all my pencil lines that are still showing. And it's funny because I feel like what takes the longest on Coatl dragons, the bodies are usually more serpent-like. They don't even always have arms like I've got here, so the body is pretty simple. But all the feathers just take a good deal of time to get in there. And I'm not going to do a lot of color variation on the body because there's going to be so much on the feathers that if I made like the chest rainbow colors or even the back here, it's going to start to look too busy with all the colors I'm already going to have going on in the feathers. So I'm going to stay pretty simple when it comes to like the body here. I'm having a little debate about what colors I want to do there, but I've got a pretty good idea. And I think sometimes painting white dragons or really light colored dragons is some of the hardest stuff because you're really looking at, well, how do I add highlights and shadows to a creature that's so light colored? How do I make that work? So it's always a little bit of a challenge, but there's a lot of books and videos, my own videos, other videos, and you can take white objects like eggs and light them and see how they kind of reflect the environment. And that helps. And paintings like this is a little larger. I started with an 11 by 15 sheet of watercolor paper, but I probably took 2 inches off the sides and an inch off the top, so it's probably now, I don't know, more like a 9-inch by 13-inch, something like that. I didn't measure it exactly, just because I didn't want a piece quite that big, but this is still bigger than a lot of the ones I've done on stream, so I tend to do small ones streaming just so they fit a little better for you guys to see, but I can move things around for you guys to see as well, so that also works. He's slowly getting there. He's looking more like a dragon. So again, I'm going to use my eraser here to clean up just a little bit and kind of lighten up some of my pencil for the arms here. I don't think I made it quite light enough. And then I'll paint over it, and then I will fully erase it. But you've got to be sure that everything is super dry before you do any kind of erasing over it. Well, I have a feeling this guy I'm going to end up offering prints of because I think he's going to be pretty popular. People like my really bright colored guys, and I think this guy's going to be awesome. I'm pondering doing some more sort of patterning on his face and also on his feathers, because you can also often have feathers with patterns. I hear one of our cats fussing. And I do kind of want to show the tropical weird patterns. I don't know. I'll figure out what those are. And I did a lot of bird watching with my family as a kid and looked a lot at field guides. We had a lot of them, and they really helped me with just trying to get a level of realism in my paintings. Well, and also in my writing for the field guides. But the more you know kind of about animals, whether they're the actual creature you're painting or something that's inspiring it, the easier I think it is to get a level of believability. He's coming along pretty well. And his tail at the bottom has this cool kind of loop-de-loop thing going on. He's not actually flying in this picture, and I often draw Coatls flying, or any of my wyverns, or kind of those types of dragons. I draw them flying, but this guy is actually sort of sitting on his tail. He's using his tail to kind of prop himself up. It's kind of coily. So it should be pretty neat once it's all done. I think one of our kittens is unhappy about being shut out of the room. That doesn't surprise me. It's one of the reasons I don't do streams much past a couple hours, because I feel like leaving them shut out, but sometimes when they come in here, they just get in the way. And a lot of times, too, with Coatls, I give them either really fluffy tails or sort of big feathery tails, and in this case, I actually did not do that. I thought it'd be cool to just give this guy kind of a, I guess you'd call it a curlicue tail. Like if he's got himself all coiled, his body coiled under him, that the end of his tail would sort of be weirdly coiled as well. And you can see outlining, once I'm done with the feathers, outlining this part's a lot faster. I think I might make his tail transition to a pretty cool color at the end. I guess we'll see how that goes. And I remember when I first started doing a lot of watercolor, just getting the brush to go where I wanted it to was a bit of a challenge. It took a lot of work, and now I don't know, I don't want to stop appreciating the fact that I can just kind of get it to do what I want a lot of the time, because it definitely wasn't the case for a while. So I'm just finishing up the outlining of his tail here, and then I'll erase some of these pencil lines. I don't really need the ones kind of showing where his belly is, because I know where that is, so I can just erase them and put the watercolor in for that after. go. It looks weird because you're just seeing his tail here, but we'll rotate this a little bit just to get a better angle and show this more easily on the camera. There we go. So now he's pretty much all outlined. I just need some more of that to dry. But I think the part that I've done up here, this is all dry, so I can really start making sure this is all cleaned up and ready. He's so cute. Actually, I'm not sure if I'd call this one as cute. This one's a little more noble than some of the super cute ones I've done. He's more noble and pretty. There we go. I think I'm going to take a break while I wait for this to dry for about 2 minutes and go grab myself something to drink. I usually do that before streams, and for some reason I did not for this one. I think I need to let his tail dry another minute or so before I can go down there and erase that part. I'll make sure this is all good up here, but there we go. And I can check on the cat who's just being a butt. So I will be back more. Okay. Acquired some iced coffee, which basically means I took leftover coffee from this morning and put some ice and milk or cream in it. Now I'm just going to clean up all the rest of our pencil lines so there won't be any stray ones left. There we go. I'm glad to hear from so many people who pop in and out that they're just kind of watching me all relax. I never thought of myself as that relaxing, but that's a nice surprise to find. Okay. Now I'm going to use just a little more of that bright yellow and put kind of the rest of the ridges. And I do a variety of different methods for doing the scales on dragon stomachs. There's different sort of patterns you can do. For this guy, I am very much using the sort of patterning you might see on a snake. And I think I want to be able to fit a little more of this. Let me see if I can put the camera up just a little higher for you guys. There we go. See a little more of him. Hopefully my light's not too glaring. Or creating shadows, that's also fun. There we go. So let's see. Once I have kind of the scales on his, oh, I guess it's not really his stomach, his belly here. Then I will blend some of my yellow and then start adding all the awesome colors that we have up on the face down into the rest of our dragon. And there's things you learn when you do a lot of dragons that coil and things about how to do some of the perspective as things curve around or disappear underneath because the tail is twisting. A lot of that is practice, and when in doubt, look at photos of coiled snakes for reference. It makes a big difference. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So I think I'm going to switch back to kind of my medium brush and just blend with just water. I'm just going to blend a lot of the shapes that are here. That just softens them. I still get to keep those lines, but it really kind of softens up the shapes, and it adds some shading. And especially for this back wing here, I definitely don't want too hard an edge on that. The cool thing about that is that where you have dry paint that you've outlined, it kind of creates a little bit of a barrier when you're painting, the same way that outlining an ink would. So that helps control kind of where your paint is going. And in this case, because he's so light for a lot of this, his belly and kind of parts of his hands here, like I really want him to be almost white, which is a little yellow. It's easier for me to kind of smudge some of my paint to create the shadows, because if I add more paint, he's just going to get too dark. I'll end up with too much yellow, and I don't want that. And there we go. All right. I can use that same process to kind of blend the wings here a little bit, so I get softer feathers and softer feather colors. And if you get it smudging too much, you can just use a paper towel or napkin or whatever your rag of choice is to blot up some of the extra paint. Look at how much softer those feathers look already. I am being very kind of cautious about when and where I'm adding darker colors, because I really want this guy to have that glowing quality to him. Oh, he is a cutie. Thank you. I like when we have people who stop and chat. He's cute, but I don't think he's like a baby dragon cute. I think he's a little too regal or noble for that. So, the tropical dragon. So I'm using what I would consider to be very tropical colors. Right now I'm just doing a whole bunch of blending with just water over the paint lines I've already put in, which just softens them and softens kind of everything. And I'll add more details on top of that. I learned this technique for doing outlines in watercolor and then using kind of a brush with just water to scrub and soften them in botanical illustration classes and wildlife illustration classes, where you want to do like a very clean outline for whatever wildlife you're painting, but you also want the inside edges to not be too hard. So this is a great way to do that. And I'm managing still to get away without using the air conditioner, which I'm really happy about. Last year it got hot so early. Actually, the last couple years, I feel like we really didn't have spring here. And normally I don't need to really use the AC till the end of April, early May. So it's expensive when you have to use it earlier. So I'm very happy that it's been really cool at night. We've been able to leave windows open. It's pretty breezy and nice now. So that's always good. All right. So this is about an hour in. You can see how long it takes for these bigger pieces. And he's starting to come to life, but we'll do I want to add the detail that really makes him come to life because I love showing how one tiny detail does that. So what I'm going to use is white ink. This is called White 2. It's by Dealer, which is a Japanese brand used for comic books in Japan. You can also get FW white ink, or this is what I usually use, Amsterdam white ink. And I actually like the Japanese brand better, but for a long time, manga supplies were not available in the US, and I was really surprised to find this on Amazon, and it was cheaper than buying the white ink I've been using. So I use my teeny tiniest brush, and I have just a tiny dab of white ink on there. And this to me is the most amazing part. And one tiny little highlight in the eye, and that brings the entire painting to life, which is really cool. And I'm going to zoom us kind of back in just for a little bit on the face so that I can show a little more of my highlighting process. So same thing, white ink. And I just tap my brush to create some textures. And it's very, very subtle. But this is what brings creatures to life. It's those tiny little details. And you don't want to overdo it with white ink. You really don't need a lot. And if it's too thick, you can add a little water. It's also a great way to add like a texture to the feathers here. As I said earlier in the video, I've looked at a lot of real feathers and real birds, and that makes a difference. So for learning to do something like this, you need to look at lizards, dinosaur skeletons, dinosaur renderings by artists of what they think they look like, all sorts of tropical birds, those help, lizards. And I'm really lucky that here in Arizona I've gotten to use a lot of live lizards as models, both in classes, and then if they just show up outside, I can take photos and draw from them. And then we have one of the top reptile shows in the world here, which is amazing, and they have no issue with you taking photos or even going and drawing there for the most part, as long as you're polite and you ask. So I used to go every year and just take pictures for drawing reference. There we go. And then I started vending there, and that was even cooler because now I get to go in before everything is open to the public and crowded and take pictures. And I don't know why it keeps getting brighter when I'm leaning over the paper. I don't know if it's reflecting off the lights. Try adjusting this. See if that helps a little bit. Maybe a little. This one's being really difficult to get good lighting for you guys. I think it's because the picture is so light. Because I'm doing very light colors. I think it's showing up pretty well. You can see my kitten is in our laundry room, which you can actually see out the window from my office because there's a weird little L shape. So you can see the window of the laundry room from the office window, and I can see her in there. It's open slightly, and she's absolutely fascinated by the fact that there's a bug outside the window. So hopefully she doesn't try to attack it. Or I will have to go get it away from her. Keep her from clawing the screen. keep trying to have her in here, but she likes to rub her head on the camera. She thinks it's like a cat scratching tool or something, and there to give her head massages, and that doesn't really work so well. Just adding tons of tiny little details, and you don't have to wait to the end to use the white. I'm kind of using some of it now on the face so you guys can see the process. I don't know if I'm going to finish this entire piece on camera today because it's pretty detailed. But you can also kind of go back and forth between using white ink and then using some darker things for shadows. I really want to do a little bit more with patterning. So I'm going to mix a little of my pink and red together. I really want to do something more to show some of the shadows here, and then I think it would be cool to do, let's see if this will work, some kind of patterns going up the face here. And I kind of don't like that the mouth is outlined in that much blue, so I'm going to add some of the pink on top of it. It'll blend it in a little more. The wonderful thing about learning watercolor, if you've done stuff like marker art, is that markers, you're kind of stuck with fixed colors. There's a few brands where you can mix your own inks to fill the markers, which is a huge production. But with watercolor, you can really invent exactly the shade. You can make it as dark or as light as you want. You can mix your colors together. So you can create these beautiful blends. Looks pretty good. Let's see if I can just notch our brightness down a little bit. There we go. So you guys can see him a little better. He's getting there. And similarly, I might use a little bit of the teal here. And you'll see me turn the paper here. It's to get a good angle for the shape I want to do. There's just some stuff that's more natural to do at certain angles. So if you're not comfortable, it doesn't seem natural, just rotate your paper. Nobody is going to care. Well, unless you're, I don't know, knocking over something or messing up someone else's drawing. That's not good, but I'm just adding a little bit more of a pattern to some of the feathers. So you can see each little detail really helps us build this creature. And I could just have left it probably the way it was without some of the white details or without some of these blue details that I'm adding on. But I think all those little things make a difference at the end. They bring stuff to life. And it's a really neat process. And I always feel like it's almost a collaborative process with, I don't know, the creative magic in the universe or the creative gods or just random happenstance of what watercolor does when you combine it in certain ways. And so you want to have ideas of what you're creating and some control, but those happy little accidents are really what make things special. So that is the most detailed part. And I want to do that first to kind of show how that was done. And a lot of the rest of this I won't need nearly as much detail on because I really want the focal point to very much be the face. But I do want to introduce, I originally was not going to use quite as much in the way of the teals, but I really want to bring them at least in kind of here and along the back. I might put some on as well. So now I'm using a larger brush, kind of just getting some of those colors started. I'm going to use my pink as well, kind of blend that in. And I want the stomach to stay really light. I'm actually not going to do much to it. We're going to keep a lot of the white that's there. And then I'm going to blend the back with a lot of pinks and yellows and some of that blue, and it should be really pretty when it's done. It just takes a lot of time. So this back wing here, I don't think I want it to just have it be quite this light, but I don't need to show as much detail in it, so I'm just going to very quickly paint it with some really light wash of yellow. I'm going to throw a little bit of that pink into it. I'm probably going to leave it without too much because, again, I just want to suggest that the other wing is back here. But your focal point is all the stuff that's closest in the foreground, so I don't need too much here other than basically the shape. There we go. I've seen we've had a lot of people popping in and out. We'll get 1 or 2 viewers and then they'll go and then we'll get 1 or 2 more. So hopefully I'm entertaining some people today. I know depending on where you live, you may not be leaving your house at all. Hopefully you have a patio or yard, or where I am, it's pretty safe for me to take a walk in the neighborhood. It's not real busy. There's a lot of space to easily stay 8 feet away from anyone else out walking a dog or anything like that. So I'm still able to go out and take a walk. It is a little weird not being able to go sit at the coffee shop or things like that I would normally do. But I am making the best of it. And I'm also used to having my streaming time kind of limited by the fact that I don't want to disrupt my boyfriend too much from whatever he wants to do in the same room around the house. He's really good. He tries to be quiet. He understands that, like, he says this is your professional job and I'm just playing video games, but I want him to get to relax when he's at home. So I'm usually kind of aware of that because the whole time I've been streaming, he's just been at home for the last 3 weeks. But since he's at work, I'm just doing all my work on camera right now, which is pretty fun. I think he is a really, really pretty dragon. He reminds me of something, but I can't quite think of what it is. But I was kind of going for a little bit of that Aztec or Mayan look, so that probably is a factor. And I'm going to keep adding more colors in here. Some of these I'm okay with them bleeding together a little bit because I'm going to pick some more things out with a smaller brush for shadows and some of the details. So just want to get kind of those basic colors there. And then I can mess with them a lot. And I kind of like having a little bit of this blue in here just to kind of create shadow, but I'm not making it as bright as what I'm doing on the feathers. And I'm actually going to start with these feathers all the way out here because I want these to really match kind of the ones I did on the head. So I'm going to start building my color out here. So I use a lot of techniques where I blend my paint on paper. I don't tend to pre-mix colors if I'm combining colors. And I tend to add a lot of a color, nice and dark like that. And then just go get some water. And I think, and then just blend or pull. I don't know how you refer to that. To me, it's pulling because I'm actually pulling the paint down the paper. And I'm pulling it with just some water on my brush. So it creates that really natural blend there. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of pink and do the same thing, but I'm going to go the opposite way. And I'm not going to make this a really dark pink, but these feathers back here are going to be kind of a pink and blue with little bits of yellow in them. So I'm touching some yellow here. And I love the way watercolor will kind of have patterns and happy accidents that happen. So I try to encourage those because I'll go back over this with a fine brush to add feather details and stuff like that. So I don't need to worry about details in this level of painting. I just need to worry about getting some neat color gradients and stuff going on. And I'll add those details later. So I'm just working on blends, and I really want to get some very vibrant. I'm using a color called lemon yellow, which is a really good vibrant yellow to try to blend this up. I'm picking up a little too much of the orange off of the other set of feathers here, so I'm just going to blot that out and go back over it with some yellow, because I want these to be really vibrant wings. So I guess I don't really need the pink there. Lesson learned. These will just be the teal and the yellow. And sometimes colors dry quite a bit lighter than when you put them on. Almost always it's lighter, not darker. And then you can just add additional layers. There we go. Starting to come to life. If you're doing anything with a lot of feathers like this, it can be pretty time consuming. If I were not on Twitch, I would probably either have a TV show on in the background or an audiobook. I'm listening to a pretty good audiobook right now. I'm trying to remember what, I think it's called King of Scars? I will check. King of Scars, I'm on chapter 7. And if you've read any of the Grishaverse books, this is, I think, her newest series. I did not read them in order. I kind of started in the middle. I haven't read the first, I guess, trilogy. And this is, I think the third trilogy. A lot of the reviews I read said the first one was okay, but it didn't really get good till Six of Crows. So I started with Six of Crows, mainly because it had 7 really awesome audiobook actors reading it, and then the opening line of the book drew me in. I don't necessarily read a lot of just straight high fantasy, but the Grishaverse books kind of got to me, and I've really been enjoying them. So I usually have something like that on in the background, just depending on how much focus I need on the painting. Usually during design phases, I can't watch anything, but once I'm just sort of working on a giant coloring book piece, something, then I can do quite a bit more. There we go. Look at those pretty wings. If it doesn't say tropical, I don't know what does. Okay. And I'm actually going to have these center feathers here be a very sort of vibrant reddish color like I've got up here. But I can't paint those while these are wet, because even with that kind of border of the orange I outlined in, it's still going to bleed everywhere. So I'm going to finish my teal feathers first, and then I'll probably work on the belly or something of the dragon while I'm waiting for this to dry. And you kind of learn how to work around a painting like that while things are drying, or how to get several paintings going at once so that you don't end up feeling impatient or just waiting a really long time. This guy is really pretty. I think it's bizarre that Kitten is watching me through a window from another window. You can see her staring at me if I glance up. She's like, why don't you let me in there? I don't know. Every time I open the door, she's kind of been a jerk. But I'm going to try and see if she'll come and hang out and chill in here. All right, the ominous door is open, so we'll see what the kittens do now. I'm trying to teach her not to jump up where I'm painting, and I feel like she only tries to really do it when I'm streaming, so we'll see. Usually she kind of gets used to the fact that I'm busy and mellows out. We shall see. And again, if you are trying to do something like this and you don't know the colors, just test them out and see how they blend together on a scrap piece of paper for the different feather gradients that you want. And also make sure that you see what they look like once they're dry, because sometimes that's quite a bit different than what they look like when they're wet. Like I said, this blue tends to dry quite a bit lighter than it looks when it's wet, so you either have to compensate for that or add some extra layers of it in afterwards. So far the kitten has not come in here and been a jerk. So we might be good. Oh, wait. I see her now. She is approaching. She's mewing. Alright, kitten. You gotta be good. You might see her come up here on the desk. We'll see what she does. She's investigating all my painting stuff now. It's funny because she sees me paint all the time, but it's like when there's a camera and a light and things, she gets a little too interested. Face over there. And of course, I always have to be careful that none of the cats put their tails in my paint, because that can end up for a disaster, not just for the cat or the painting, but for other things. I feel like she gets more angry when she's shut out than when I let her in a room and kind of work with her. Oh, she fell down. You go over there. People keep asking to see her because a lot of the other friends I have who stream who are DJs have been dancing with their cats or showing cat cams and stuff, and I'd love to do that, but I only have really one good webcam, which I specifically got because it's good for art streaming. And when I looked at maybe getting a second one to show either the cat or me or something, they've all been sold out because everybody's stuck at home, so everybody's getting webcams to communicate with right now. So that's kind of not been an option. And I also don't think any of our cats would sit in one place long enough if they actually had a camera pointed at them, but we'll see in the future. Usually they get kind of bored and leave me alone, but it just depends. The last thing you want is cat footprints in your paint, so definitely if you have pets or other people around, you have to learn how to work with them when it comes to you both painting and streaming. Alright, don't be a jerk, kitten. Go settle down. We're working on it. Now she's lying on the floor and the older cat's growling at her, which is pretty funny. Maybe they'll go play. I do have a bunch of cats, but it's great because they play with each other. And I'm usually around writing, painting. Guys. Okay, so I got all my teal in, and it looks nice and bright. And I think I have to show at least a little bit of that if the feathers back here have the same pattern, but I do not want to do too much. So I'm just going to use a much more watered down version of the same color. So in watercolor, all you do to make it lighter is add more water and less of the paint. Just going to show it very lightly back here and fade it out. This should work. Because I do want you to be able to tell this is like the same type of feathers back here, but I don't want it as detailed and I don't want it as dark. Because otherwise the face and those feathers are not going to stand out enough. The funniest thing about my kitten is, well, I guess it's our kitten. She showed up just a little over a year ago, the very end of March, at our door, and insisted we adopt her. And she loves to bug me when I'm at the computer. She doesn't bug me when I'm anywhere else. So since I'm painting by the computer, she's bugging me. But if I were in the living room painting, she usually doesn't bug me very much. She might come over for 2 minutes and then she goes and settles down. the weirdest thing is she never bugs Daniel when he's at his computer, which is in the same room as my computer. Sometimes she'll sit on my desk when I'm not here and just watch him play games or fall asleep there. But she doesn't like harass him anywhere near how she harasses me. And we have a little bit of a debate as to if that's because she likes him better or she wants more of my attention than his, or because he's playing games and not working when he's at home because he works elsewhere. And if somehow she can tell. Will you two stop? These two cats are trying to have a little argument here. I'm going to scoot them out of the way. There we go. And they start getting hungry a little later because I usually feed them. Oh, it's about an hour and a half till their food time, so they can wait. It's plenty. So now I am wanting to do some of these colors in here, but I really have to let everything dry that I already did on the wings. So I'm just going to do a little more blending with just straight up water onto the stomach. I'm just going to blend all those yellows I put on to really make sure that it is softer. And like I said, for this we're leaving it almost white, so I'm just going to use this yellow and blend it, but leave kind of a spot of white in the middle. Do that a little bit up here so that it has kind of a reflective shine for the scales. I don't need to add more yellow because it's such a bright color and we're keeping this pretty light. Yep. All right. Like I said, part of the frustrating thing about watercolor can be waiting for things to dry. So sometimes I'll have 3 or 4 pieces going at the same time, depending on the project, just to not waste time. Zoom us back out here so we can see a little more of him. And I'll go ahead and blend kind of this area back here a little bit. And then I'll be able to paint the rest of the color around that. I'm really happy with how this guy's coming out so far. It's just quite a long process to get everything layered on here. So with my smaller paintings, if I've done them in ink, I maybe spend 40 minutes to an hour on color. But since this one, I just went from a pencil sketch, I probably spent 10 or 15 minutes on the pencil sketch. On the actual painting will take between 2 or 3 hours. And if he had more details or a full background behind him, it would take even longer. I've done up to 16 hours on pieces with crazy detailed backgrounds. All right, so hoping, just checking what's dry here, that we're fairly dry with the yellow and the teal, which we are. Now I can, I'll use kind of a medium brush for this. So I'm going to start kind of with my same pink here, because that's a good base color. And then I'm going to mix kind of some reds into it. I don't want to overdo how bright these feathers are, so I'm just going to approach it pretty gradually. And I'm going to blend more yellow kind of onto the pink feathers there, and we're going to create kind of a cool blend. That's pretty good. So these feathers up here at the very top are a lot smaller. And if you've looked at real bird wings, you know that feathers get bigger and bigger. They start smaller closest to the body up here, and they'll get bigger and bigger to the ones at the end of the wings. It has to do with catching the wind the best and the air currents. And I know a little bit about that. Knowing a little bit of how things work scientifically definitely helps when you're understanding what you're painting for creature design, why feathers are certain shapes and what their purpose is. I'm just gonna get some nice sort of pinkish red painted in. I'm leaving little bits of white on some of these. And then I'm going to make this a little more of an intense red in some areas using a smaller brush. And I'm going to add a little more yellow to the feathers up at the top here, and we'll see how that looks. But I think I'm going to bring a little yellow in now and just start kind of blending it up into here. I really want these feathers to be kind of reminiscent of a sunset. Many tropical drinks are reminiscent of sunsets, so I'm kind of trying to mirror all of that. This I'm just going to go very light, like I'm really adding a lot of water and not as much paint. And I'm leaving some white highlights showing too. So I really want those feathers up there to kind of be the most yellow pale colors. And the nice thing is the watercolor, you can always go darker. It's harder to go lighter, you can, either with white paint or with using water and scrubbing out some of the paint and then removing it, but that can damage the paper if you do that too much. So you really want to plan for where the lighter colors need to be and gradually go darker versus having them be too dark. And again, that's kind of a balance you start to figure out when you've painted a lot. Having fun with this guy. So yeah, I kind of wanted to have some reds in here because, like I said, I'm kind of basing him on sunsets, tropical drinks, and you often have cherries in those, so he kind of reminded me of pineapples and cherries. I really would like a pina colada now. This is the problem with paintings that are related to drinks or food. I did an entire book of dessert-themed dragons and other dessert creatures, fairies and goblins and monsters. And it was really hard because I had to look at a lot of pictures of desserts for reference. I was pretty much hungry like the entire time I was working on that book. It was really terrible. But a lot of people like it, and this book is going to be kind of matching it a bit. I figure if that's the dessert book, this one's all the kind of beverages that go with it. It's teas and coffees, and some of the booze drinks and juices, and I've had a lot of fun working with my awesome Patreon subscribers to kind of come up with all different sorts of creatures we can include. And this guy didn't get the most votes, but I go for, I'll look for what gets the most votes, do those paintings, and then kind of work my way down on this one, somewhere in the middle this month. The painting that got the second most votes I haven't done yet because it's going to be a little bit of a complicated, very detailed picture. And I've been trying to decide what medium I want to do that in, if I want to do it digitally or if I want to do it on watercolor paper and do a really big painting. I'm having a debate. It's a goblin tea party, so I will be working on that at some point. I just haven't quite decided how I want to approach that one. And I feel like if I haven't decided that yet, it's better to work on one or two other paintings first for the month and let that sort of stew in my brain, because I will often end up with a picture in my head of exactly how it should be. And I usually have plenty of background stuff to watch, but we've been home so much. Normally, I kind of divide it up between watching movies or TV shows in the background, and listening to music and doing audiobooks, and going out somewhere like the park or the zoo or the coffee shop to paint. And with us just being at home and maybe leaving, gosh, once every 10 days to buy groceries, something like that, because we can order so much online now, we don't have to go out often. Even with taking walks and stuff occasionally, it's been a little weird, and I've kind of watched a lot of the shows that would normally take me longer to catch up on, so I've had to explore other things. I've started watching this show called Deputy about the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, but it is the most unrealistic look at policing I think I might have seen in a TV show ever. It definitely has a little more of the ridiculousness of something like Bad Boys or some of those action movies like Lethal Weapon. It's a little silly. I really like the cast, which is why I'm watching it, but it very much treats LA like the Wild West, which was not what it was like when I lived there, but I guess you never know. It's like, I don't think we had that level of like spaghetti western shootouts and as much just ridiculousness car chase wise. I mean, LA does have its share of crime and weird crime, but it's definitely very cowboy-esque in the Deputy series. But it's a good entertaining thing if you can suspend your belief in reality completely to watch it. There we go. So now you can see he's really starting to come to life just from all of those feathers and things that we've been adding in. And now that some of them are dry, though I'm actually, I think, working on the ones on his back, I'm going to work a little on the ones around his face. And I think you find which brushes you're more comfortable with for doing which sorts of things, which sizes, and those sorts of things, and then you just sort of naturally end up switching between them. Took me a little while to get to that, but now it's almost like second nature to just grab the brush I need without thinking about it. Occasionally you'll see me change up a brush because I have grabbed a size that does not work for what I'm trying to do, but this works pretty well for everything so far. I've been able to do plenty of details, and I definitely use my smallest brushes for little tiny shadows and for little tiny highlights. So the darkest and lightest areas I use the smallest brushes for. Just to do the highlights and things like that. So I have a lot of control over them. And I'm just working on getting a little more detail into a few spots here. I want to deepen the shadow under the chin just a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to have to work a little bit more on some of these feathers and the back of our dragon, because right now it looks a little weird there. It'll look cool when it's done. Alright, it looks better. So you're just working large areas, light colors, and then smaller and smaller areas and darker colors until you end up finished. Now, I used to have more trouble with patience, but now I just sort of get very meditative while I'm sitting here painting and talking and hopefully entertaining one or two people. I'm just working on really building all these feathers here. I feel like this guy is a little too light right here because it's kind of behind the ear. It doesn't need to be that light. Now I'm going to work on the feathers on the back a little bit. Which I'm going to use a little bit of red. I just want these to kind of stand out just a little from some of the rest. So I'll use a little red and a little bit of my pink. Just get this blended in with some nice shadows. And it is a lot of work when you're doing larger paintings, when you're doing really detailed paintings, but I find it. Hi, Vamp Feline. Oh, thank you. It is inspired by tropical drinks. So this is a tropical dragon that was kind of, I was thinking, what would represent pina coladas and things I wish I had the drink right now. So I've just been slowly building all of the details and colors on this guy. And I'm doing it pretty slowly because I don't want to make him too dark in places. And I hope you are doing well. I believe that you and Ricky are DJing tonight, which I am looking forward to a lot because I remember the theme being related to the 80s. And I am a big fan of 80s music, being a child of the 80s. I would super love a pina colada. I think we should go get some after this. Actually, the gal who runs Tucson Steampunk Society is saying that we're going to reserve a big room at Kontiki, and I'll go get some tropical drinks after we're allowed to leave the house again and things have more or less returned to normal. Though I used to go to, I'm trying to think if it was Bevmo or the other beverage place, which I can never remember what the other one's called, Total Wine. And they have not only like big things of mudslide mix, but also pina colada mix, and it already has the alcohol and everything in it. All you do is add ice, or if you want to cut it a little bit, you can add ice cream or milk or something to it, so or some other kind of juice. So I used to get those big ones and just use the blender. And I don't think I can count a trip to Bevmo or Total Wine as an essential needed reason to leave the house. Though I'm sure some people are. Is it Total Wine? Okay, cool. Because I know Daniel and I went to both of them in the same day, and we each got something in each of them, and I cannot remember which one had those. But they weren't super expensive. I want to say they were like huge jugs, and they were like 13 or 14 bucks. And then you could, what I would do is I'd make like a smoothie and just put the pina colada stuff in it. So it's like a good cheaty way if you don't want to buy like rum and all the separate ingredients. So yeah, this is like every tropical color that I like in a painting. I blame my Patreon subscribers. I put Pina Colada Coatl on a list because I thought that name sounded fun. But good portion of like the dragons I'm coming up with are just what do I think sounds like a funny name for the book, and then building that off. And I was mentioning earlier on the stream, I have to figure out how to do a Big Goblin Tea Party painting. So I've kind of had that in my mind all week of like, how am I going to make that work? And it's super quiet here because Daniel's back at work, so he's not gaming or watching TV or even taking a nap. So he said people are still coming in and buying blinds, which I don't know how essential that is either, but they sell a lot of other essentials there, so the store has to stay open. But I don't know if blinds or shades are that essential. I mean, I guess you could tack a sheet up right now, but then again, I guess we don't know how long all this is going to last. So I tried to let the cats in here, but they were still being difficult. I don't know. I feel like they have like, oh, you're doing something with a camera. Now we're just going to be jerks. Yeah, he's doing okay. He came back for lunch before I was streaming, and he's doing okay. He's just trying to avoid people, which is hard when you work in retail. Um, yeah, I think people are going kind of stir crazy and finding reasons they have to leave the house, which is not good. I really wanted to leave the house, go buy coffee this morning, but I was good. I made coffee at home instead because I'm trying not to leave too much. He works at Lowe's. He is the blind guy. We make a lot of jokes about this. He's actually the person you go to see for custom blinds or window coverings, really, of any type. But we make a lot of jokes about him being a blind guy because it's funny. But yeah, Lowe's does sell a lot of stuff that could be considered essential, light bulbs and things for plumbing repairs and whatever. Because these are things that like, hey, if the handle on your toilet breaks right now, I think it's something you're going to go get a replacement for rather than waiting, because obviously if you're stuck at home all the time you have to use your bathroom. So well, they need to be open for those things, and they can't really pull all the non-essential stuff out of the store easily because it's obviously mixed through, and you can't really decide for some things what's essential for. Oh, people are going in there and buying like throw rugs and gardening stuff. And I was happy when I went to Trader Joe's yesterday that at least most of the customers were wearing masks. That was nice. And all but one of them were respecting social distancing. There was one guy on his cell phone who was on his cell phone on hands free, like he had a headset, which was nice, but he was talking very loudly and he was definitely not respecting the distances of people in the store when everybody else there was. And it wasn't even that busy, so I don't know. Just because you think you're important doesn't mean you won't get sick. But yeah, there's just going to be people like that. And hopefully those people don't make the rest of us have problems. And I know you're dealing with people at work every day too, so well, not every day, but every day that you're at work. I think though a lot of the horror stories I've heard have been more. I've had more experiences with people not respecting distance at like Safeway, for example. And I know I've heard stories like I haven't gone to a Fry's in a while, but that Fry's is just people have been crazy. So I think for some reason Trader Joe's and Whole Foods are a little more um, chill. Their customers are. And the weird thing is, I think it's because people think that they are more expensive and that they only sell organic stuff, which I learned when I lived in San Francisco. I used to walk to Whole Foods there. Isn't the case. If you're just paying attention and you buy what's on sale, you can shop pretty reasonably. And at Trader Joe's, a lot of stuff there is cheaper than it is at like Safeway or Fry's. I know like eggs are, for example, and they sell plenty of stuff that isn't organic. It's just this weird thing where people think Trader Joe's is a health food store, and I'm okay with that if it keeps people who are going to go in there and ransack the store out. So, I think it's kind of just a weird phenomena. I don't know. Oh, at least people are getting better at being nice. I'm like, know that you're working in a very essential job, making sure people can buy food and stuff, and respect that the people are still going to work and doing the best they can. It's got to be weird though. Like, it's really weird. I don't even think I leave the house that much on a regular basis, but it's weird when I do leave the house trying to keep distances from people. And I'm really like, getting enough food shopping where, because we occasionally get takeout and I could freeze some stuff, we don't need to leave the house for another 10 days. So it's just weird. It's very weird. And I do like cooking. So I'm going to experiment with a bunch of foods this weekend because Daniel said he doesn't mind my experimenting. Heh heh heh. So he's definitely in some weird things while I've been learning to cook new dishes, but um, I'm gonna try to make some kind of tacos or wraps that are made with, like, instead of using more traditional taco seasoning for my meat, I'm actually gonna use soyaki sauce, so they'll be more like teriyaki tacos with beef and shrimp and mushrooms and asparagus. That sounds weird, but I read this recipe of like shrimp asparagus tacos and I was like, that actually sounds really good. I want to try that. So we'll see how that goes. figure if it doesn't work, we'll just have the asparagus on the side. So I try to look up new recipes, especially right now, so we don't get totally bored. Though, oddly, we have formed a habit of ordering takeout from The Habit, which I didn't even know about. It's got to be a newer chain because I didn't even hear about them till Daniel found them. I know they haven't been open here that long, but I didn't even know about the chain. It is a national chain, but they have now replaced any type of burger place for me. I like them better than Whataburger or In-N-Out. The only thing we don't like from them is I really am not a huge fan of their buns and breads, but that's also the least healthy thing. So, because you can substitute stuff when you order online, we order everything as lettuce wraps, which sounds weird, but you can get like a fried chicken teriyaki lettuce wrap instead of a burger, and it's better. It's really, really messy, but it's better. And they're the only fast food type burger place I've ever known to do tempura green beans, which are really not that bad for you. They're better food than fries because you're getting beans and they're not overcooked. They're really, really good. So, yeah, we've been making way too much of a habit from ordering from The Habit. Um, we tend to either get steak or chicken as wraps and then have them put like portobello mushrooms and teriyaki sauce on it and bacon. Daniel wants everything with bacon. So that's been an experience. But I mean, I like bacon. I just probably wouldn't add it on as much. But since he's adding it on and we're usually getting the same thing, it's just easier to get two of the same thing because we're lazy. This guy's coming out pretty well. He's very pretty. Or she. It could be a she. And I don't really think I'm going to do much of a background on this piece because I don't think it needs it. This dragon is so colorful that I think a background would be too distracting. And the only reason I'm able to not be sleepy right now, because it's normally my sleepy time in the afternoon, is I am took our leftover coffee from breakfast and made iced coffee. Which probably means I won't be sleeping until tonight because this will be like cup of coffee number 3, or I guess it's 2 cups in a glass. But we don't make our coffee real strong, so there we go. Trying to get just enough of an edge so that you can see the limbs, but I don't want stuff to be too dark here. I totally want one of these dragons now. I think they're pretty small too. I don't think this is a huge creature. I'm trying to decide if they're teeny tiny or somewhere kind of in the middle, but now this is dry. I can add a little more feather texture to the feathers. Which I usually do by just painting slanted lines along the rounded edge. So on these, one edge is usually straighter and one edge is more of curved out. And I just add lines on the curved out edge. And it looks like a feather. And I have now been working on this guy for 2 hours. This is definitely going to be at least a 3 hour. It's the size of a hummingbird. He should be really small. I could do that. The strangest tiny creature I think I've done in my books is the miniature flying giraffe. So I did a giraffe with really cute little wings, and it is the size of a hummingbird, just so that it can fly around people's gardens because I love the idea of tiny little critters. Then this one could easily, like, if it's pretty small, it could easily be found in the gardens of tropical resorts in South America and sneak sips of people's drinks. I really want a pina colada so bad right now. Iced coffee does not taste like a pina colada. You just say that. It does not. It does not taste the same. Not even close. But I don't have one, so I have to live with it. I'm trying to decide if I want to keep streaming and do a full 3-hour stream and try to finish this guy. I said normally I haven't been streaming as long as Daniel's here, and I'm trying to make sure if he wants to make a racket, I'm not annoying him too much. But since he's at work and I have to do this anyway, and I'm out of good TV shows to watch. Like, I'm really good that some of the stations like Hulu kind of get stuff as it airs, but they're only certain days of the week, and I think I'm through all of the new ones for this week. So, and I don't even think I'm that picky a TV viewer. It's just I tend to put stuff on in the background, and I'm trying to avoid depressing shows because the news and the world is depressing enough right now. So I'm trying to watch more upbeat or at least balanced things. So now that this hand is dry, I'm just going to add hand, claw, paw, add a little more texture to it. And I do this by using a brush that isn't too wet and then kind of scribbling. That one's still too wet. Let that paw dry some more. Okay. Slowly making progress. The wings are the most time-consuming thing about this entire piece. They almost always are when I do big elaborate wings. I did a winged Egyptian cat that took forever to do the wings because I put so many colors in them. They're really pretty, but it took a really long time. Fortunately, I really only have to do one wing since that other one's kind of in the background. It doesn't need much detail. So I just have to kind of work on all the feathers on this one. And I am looking forward to having a drink after work and doing some dancing. It just will not be a pina colada because we don't have stuff to make one. Unfortunately, I don't think they have that stuff at like the regular grocery store. I want to say it was like a weird Mexican brand that I got too, but it was really good. Cause yeah, if they had the pre-done pina colada stuff at Safeway, then I could just grab it when I was grabbing other grocery stuff, but not the case. Sadly. Or if we could have convinced the wench to do like tropical drinks with our goth nachos when that happens. I still have my heart set on goth nacho night. It has to happen. I'm trying to remember too, because I only get to keep these videos on Twitch for about 14 days to download copies, and then I'm going to upload them, and I actually should start doing that onto YouTube. And I'm thinking how weird this is going to be in 5 or 10 years if the videos are still there. We're all looking back on what it was like being in quarantine. And in some ways, I think it's really weird, and in other ways, I think people are totally overreacting. They're acting like we're in like The Walking Dead, or like you can't step outside your door and get some fresh air because the air will kill you, or something. And I'm like, we're not in that Fog movie. There was a, I don't remember what it was called. That's not the actual Fog movie or TV series. A French movie about this mist that was way more terrifying than most things, and it's they don't know what's caused it, but if you go down into the mist, you just die. You can't breathe right and you just die. So the people in the upper apartment buildings are kind of above the level of this foggy mist that has rolled in, but they have to put on breathing apparatus and kind of go down into it to do things. And it goes from these like long, slow waiting things, which are very similar to what we're doing now, to these very intense, like crazy action scenes. I think the French definitely have us with that one on movies about fog and mist because that one's way suspenseful. Uh, I watched that maybe 2 or 3 months ago before all this started, as I would not watch that kind of movie now. It would probably traumatize me even worse. But yeah, I don't think we're at that level. We can still order takeout, we can still order groceries, we can go buy groceries, we can get things delivered, we can still watch the news and media. It's not like we're cut off from the world and we don't know what's going on. So I don't really think it's the apocalypse or anything. I think it's just the waiting gets to everybody and we just got to do the best we can. Which is why I am hopefully entertaining some people on the stream. Here we go, lots of feathers. And I could do feathers pretty fast now just because I've painted so many. And I do have how to paint feathers in my how to draw book that I put out in, I want to say October of last year. It's called Summoning Creatures. And I actually cover a bunch of different kinds of wings. I cover like reptilian bat wings and how to draw and paint those, butterfly and insect wings of different types, and then also feathers and feather wings. So that whatever kind of creature you're making, you can swap in whatever kind of wing you want and know how to draw or paint those. I'm just having fun with lots of feathers. There's so many feathers. There we go. So sometimes it's just those little lines that I'm doing that really give it the feeling of it being a feather. It doesn't need to have every little thing painted. It just needs to have enough of those kinds of details layered in. That. And it looks like a feather. And now I have to repeat that process on a little bit of the rest of this. I need to do a little bit more in here. These feathers are really small in this part. So they don't need as many of those little lines. I just want to clean up the edge a little bit and kind of make sure they look consistent in size. So if they look too big, I'm going to break them up a little bit here. There we go. And the trick of the watercolor is that if you are painting on an area that's wet, your colors are going to bleed out and blend together. And if you are painting on an area that's dry, like I'm doing, you're painting on top of paint that's already there. Now you can still smudge that paint if you use a lot of water on top of it, but mostly you can just add layers of paint to create all the shadows. Oh, thank you, Vamp Feline. She said it's coming along beautifully. Sometimes I get into pieces like this and I'm like, why did I think it would be cool to paint 8,000 feathers? Or I think the worst one is I thought it would be cool to do like a bookworm that had such a huge hoard of books that it was just piles and piles of books. So I drew it all out and I think I did that one all in ink, and then I went to do the painting and realized that not only had I drawn all these little tiny books, I was going to have to paint them all different colors. And now what I was like, oh my god, I put like 300 books in this picture. What was I thinking? But it's rewarding afterwards. In some areas where it looks a little soft, like in here, I'm going to add some white in a couple minutes, and that'll just brighten that up. So the feathers are almost done. I feel like I need to just bring a little more red in here and kind of define a few of these a little bit better, but it's not going to need very much to kind of create those same sorts of textures. And the more paintings you do, the more better you get good at like planning the order to paint things in and when to wait for things to dry. And I made sure that I painted all the colors that went under this, the yellows and the teals, for the next row of feathers before I'm in here with red, because this is most likely to kind of smudge things up and have issues with it bleeding onto other colors, because red's so pigmented and so bright. If I get a little yellow on my red, it's no big deal. But if I get a lot of red on my yellow, that's going to really ruin the effect. So there we go. I definitely have gotten a lot faster. Even just painting on Twitch, I'm faster than the first couple demos I did. I learned how to get a camera set up in a better position so that it's not in my way as much. When I used to do videos, the camera would get put away and taken back out all the time, and it was kind of a pain. So now I have the camera kind of more or less permanently clamped to the back of my desk versus the front, which makes it a lot easier. And I'm going to intentionally blend just a little bit of my red out here because I kind of want there to be a little bit of a shadow in this area. There we are. If like it needed it. Okay. The only one that doesn't look done is, for some reason, this one here is not very red. Oh, I didn't add quite as much red on that guy, so do that now. Make sure if there's any other place I need a little more texture, but I think the feathers are pretty much done. Yay! This is going to end up being probably the longest stream I've done kind of in one go. And maybe when I post this to YouTube, we'll do it as a sped up video without all the talking as much. Though you can just speed up videos on there too. Okay. I don't feel like the reds are really showing. Let's see if this helps. Quite the way I want. There we go. I want you to see how red they are, but I want you to actually be able to see the shades and stuff I'm doing, which I think as the camera adjusts the different colors, I have to adjust the camera a little bit. But okay, the hardest part is done. Rejoice, celebrate. Now I just got to work on the rest of the body, which I get to switch to a bigger brush for. And after this, I'll go spend some time with my poor cats who are like, why did you shut us out? But it's still just about an hour until they normally get fed, so they can learn to be a little patient, though. I hear Stormy out there meowing. Her full name is Stormageddon, after the baby in Doctor Who. But she got named before they knew that she was a she, because the baby in Doctor Who's a boy. But Stormageddon still works, so we kept it. That's actually how they got me to adopt her. The friends who had her, they said, we named her Stormageddon. We know you love Stormageddon and Doctor Who. And then I had to take the kitten in. But I'm at a hard stop. No more cats. We can't afford the time, the space, or the feeding budget for any more critters. Especially as they start to get older. Yeah, she's out there growing. She's we call her our smoker cat, because she's like, wah. She's like a really hoarse meow. I don't know what she's doing. I tried leaving the door open, but they kept being jerks. Okay, so I want to kind of blend this down with pink and just a little bit of yellow. Which if they mix will make orange anyway, but and then I'm going to blend my pink back here a bit, and then I'll add a little bit of blue, which I don't mind doing when it's wet because it'll blend in to the ends here. The meowing has stopped. If that's a good sign or if that means they're plotting my demise in the other room. I'm just creating textures here where you can see some of my other paint colors through it. You do it with kind of basically scribbling with the brush. It's a great way to kind of make it look like scales. I think it looks like scales. And then I just have to repeat all of that on the rest of this entire dragon tail down here. It's getting there. That part's a lot faster. Obviously, I just did, what, like 2 inches of tail there. Much faster than I did all the feathers. So. And if you find you get your paint too close to the other colors while it's still wet, you can just blot it out. Sometimes I accidentally go a little too close, but I think it's pretty easy on this part with the big brush. Yeah, don't blame me for needing a nap before tonight, Vamphaline. So, oh, awesome. Well, I will see you later, and I will enjoy your music later on, too. We've been promoting all of the local DJs on the channel when there's folks on here for me to promote to. Pretty quiet this afternoon. I think a lot of people are either sleeping or back at work or whatnot. But, oh, well, I'm working anyway, so I'm happy to stream. It's a little weird talking to myself after a while, but sometimes we get folks in here, so. There are days when I feel like I get like 10 people watching, and there are days when I get like 1 or 2 or none at all. So I know people watch it on playback though, so that's cool. And I'm through the most time consuming part, which is also cool. Everyone should just be glad I don't start telling really bad puns all the time while I'm painting. Because I know a lot of them. But then you guys would have all my bad puns, and I wouldn't have them for use at other times. So I usually save them for conventions and to really annoy my boyfriend. Though he has told me just as many bad jokes, so. But I think plenty of the ones he's told me have been worse, so he can't really give me a hard time about it. Bye. Have a good nap. Get lots of sleep so you can DJ awesomeness later. So working on the tail down here. And then I'll add the blue, a little yellow, and some highlights, and we'll be done. This part obviously much faster than detailed feathers that are a bunch of different colors. I did say I wanted something different with the very end of the tail here, though. So while it's still wet, I'm going to add some red just to the very end of the tail here. And I will blend it a little water here. It gets lighter. I think that looks kind of cool. Okay, then I can start working on the part that's already dried. Oh, I guess it hasn't dried that much. It's still kind of getting very blendy in there. All right. Let that dry then. So while that is drying, I will change over to my white ink again and a teeny tiny brush. More teeny tiny brush. I'm just going to go in here and add not a lot, but a few highlights to the wings, to the feathers here, to bring them to life even more. Probably can switch to a slightly different brush for that. There we go. So because these are so kind of dark, I want to add some of the highlights and feather texture with white ink onto them. And I can, if it's too white later, I can just add a little yellow on top because my white ink won't smudge because it's waterproof once it's dry. Go. I don't want to do too much of that. I don't think it needs too much. I just kind of want to kind of suggest, keep bumping my paper here. There we go. Kind of want to suggest some of the feathers and things have a little more texture here, just the edges. And I'm not going to do this on every single feather all over the whole dragon because that would take forever and it's really not needed. And I did that kind of up in the face, but I think it needs it a little more on a couple of these, so I'll go ahead and just give this feather and this feather a little more. And after this, maybe I'll see about putting some of my other videos that I've done earlier on Twitch onto YouTube before they go away. I already have copies of a bunch of them downloaded. I wasn't wanting to hog our upload speed for a bit, but since it's just me here right now, that's not really an issue as much. There we go. So sometimes just those little tiny details are what makes all the difference. And adds those little pops of life to your dragon. And I'll be doing some of that onto the tail too, but since the tail's still wet, I have to add the blue first and all that fun stuff. But I can come in here and work on these parts that are already dry. I want to make the spiral pattern that I put by the wings kind of stand out. And that's very much influenced by mostly by Aztec stuff, since a lot of Coatls are related to ancient Aztec cultures. I tend to look at a lot of ancient stuff for inspiration in general. I look at Egyptian stuff, but for Southwestern or South American creatures like this, I look at Aztec artifacts, and they often have a lot of spiral motifs. So I try to work some of those in. I kind of think that makes a little cool fantasy sort of thing going on. Just add a few more highlights along the wings here. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm just trying to create the textures of feathers. Sometimes I'm more successful than others, but I've done a lot of them, so it's a little easier now than when I started. Trying to see if I can finish this guy up before I stop, but I still have quite a bit of small detail to do. I want to do a little more in the hands here. Just a great way to add scales and textures and little highlight details. That looks pretty good. And I don't know how much I really need to do. I think the blue feathers look pretty good. And this might even be too bright. Once it's really dry, I'll see if I want to tone that down a little bit. Okay. Cover the white ink for now. Check. We're fairly dry over here now. So now I can go tap my brush with some blue. Probably go to the bigger brush for this. I'm just going to try to create kind of a scale looking texture going down our dragon here. I don't want it to be too pink, so this might right now might be a little too pink on the body. Might bring a little more of that red in, or a little more yellow. We'll see as I kind of build this down here. But yeah, I think it needs a little more red. So come into this part here with a little bit more. So I want him to be pretty light and pastel-y, but I don't think he needs to be pink everywhere. I think that's a little too much, so I'm just gonna bring a little more of the red in there. And I'm just gonna blot that back a tiny bit so we can blend it in a little more. There we go. This guy is a very, very happy tropical dragon. And I just have to finish building all of the texture on the tail and he'll be done. Oh, and sign it. You gotta remember to always sign art. Oh, we just had a bunch of people come in a raiding party. That's always fun too. I think I've been painting a lot of happy dragons on Twitch and a lot of happy creatures and less scary ones, probably because the world is so scary right now. I'm shying away from scarier creatures. Though I suppose I could do one that's really creepy one day just to show variety. I thought it would be fun to do a feather dragon because I don't think I've done one on here before. So yeah, the trick to watercolor is just building all of the layers, letting things dry, adding other textured layers on top until it looks, in this case, like scales. I think I'm painting a tropical dragon because I really want a tropical drink. Something I should have considered when I was out shopping last, but oh well. And the color I am using is just regular cerulean blue. It looks a little more of a red blue because I'm using it on top of a pink color that is called Opera. I have, as I said earlier in the video, no idea why they feel the need to name a pink color Opera, but I'm going to look that up at some point, so I haven't answered that question because I've asked that question and I've had other people on the stream ask me. So I'm going to have to try to figure that out. I cannot be the only artist who wanders around wondering about the the origin of the names of colors of paint and pencils. So a lot of paints are actually named for the minerals they were originally created from, but I don't think opera is a mineral. Maybe I've just never heard of it. That'd be really weird. If anybody watching has questions, comments, I'm always happy to answer them. I sometimes go over all my paint brands and things for people interested, but try not to do it too often in videos because I don't want to repeat things for everyone every time they are streaming or watching the video replay later. Okay, I'm going to add a little more red so he's not too pink a dragon. Maybe a little more yellow in a few spots. Like how it took me, 2 hours to do the wings and the face, and then like 20 minutes to do the body because it's so much simpler that I don't think it needs that much detail. I think most of the detail is going to kind of stay in the face because that's where I want the focus of the piece. I think he's coming along pretty good. He is a very happy dragon. And yeah, this is a little too pastel at the bottom compared to the colors in the wings, but what I'm going to do is come in with some lemon yellow, which is the most primary yellow color that you can get in watercolor. I'm going to layer that all the way down here. And where it touches my blues, it's going to look a little greener, which I think is fine because that's already happening in the wings. Just to get a little more of a tropical vibe going on. That's better. And then when this is completely dry, I will add a few more highlights and I'm going to sign it. But I think we'll actually have done this in under 3 hours, which for this size piece without a background is pretty good. With backgrounds or even more detailed dragons, I've done anywhere from 8 to 16 hours on one of these. But I think if I did 16 hours in one sitting on a stream, you guys would be like, what the heck? I usually take breaks. Mostly because I have cats and a boyfriend who like to have things like food and sleep. But sometimes I do like a really long session. And sometimes I'll forget that I haven't had a bathroom break or food for a while if I get really involved in a painting. Same thing happens to me if I'm writing. If I get really involved in writing for a book, and then I just totally forget that, I probably should take breaks and stretch my legs. So I actually have a watch. I'm not wearing it today. I have a watch that I set to vibrate. I don't usually wear it while I stream because it would interrupt me, but I can set it to vibrate if I'm sitting for more than like 25 minutes, so I get up and stretch and things like that. Okay. I think this is getting pretty close. And if anybody watching wants to know more about me, you can visit my website. It is raredragons.com. I always put that right on kind of the streaming frame border. And I have all different sorts of social media. Those are listed on my Twitch page and also on my website. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can subscribe on Patreon. And you actually get to vote or make requests or both. This was a piece that my subscribers voted I should do, a Pina Colada Inspired dragon. So I think, to me, if a Pina Colada were a dragon, if a nice tropical pineapple coconut drink were a dragon, this is what it would look like. And you can also follow me here on Twitch if you want to be notified when I stream. I've been streaming almost every day. I try to vary it up from morning to afternoon to evening. which is not always easy because I do have a light, but I can't always get the best lighting for watercolor on the camera, even if I'm getting it for painting on the paper, which is a little tricky. Like right now, this is looking a little dark, but it's really not. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. The problem is if I get the light right for the bottom part, then it gets too bright on the top part and fun things like that, but we'll try here. There we go. That's a little bit better. But yeah, I try to vary it so if you're tuning in from different time zones or you work different jobs. I know I have a couple kids who like to watch me paint, and they're in Ohio, which I believe is a couple hours ahead at least. Here in Arizona, we don't believe in daylight savings time, or maybe we believe in it, but we think it's for wimps because we don't do it. Yeah, if you follow me, it'll let you know when I'm streaming, unless you have the alert turned on for that. And I'm always happy to take requests and answer questions and make new friends, especially with us all sitting at home like we are right now so much of the time. Though a good handful of people, my boyfriend and Vamp Feline, who's in the chat earlier, are still going to work at jobs that are considered essential. And I don't usually stream too late at night because a lot of the local DJs here in Arizona and specifically in Tucson, they've been doing marvelous streams. So I try not to conflict with them. And also because I usually want to tune in, dance, or at least have a drink and relax. So I know tonight, Ricky Stranger and Vamp Feline, who are two awesome DJs, are doing a Babes of the 80s stream, which should be really fun. I'm super looking forward to that. We'll definitely be dancing. I don't see how you could play music from Babes of the 80s and not have people dance. All right, so the last little details are if there's any places here where I want to just add some highlights to the scales. I usually just use a little white ink, tap the brush, and miraculously the dragon has glistening scales. And you can actually, when you do it, if you plant your hand so that this side of your hand is not moving at all, and all it's moving are your fingers like this, it's very easy to make patterns that look pretty regular and look like they could be scales. It's very easy to control kind of those patterns and do them very quickly. And you just learn how and where to plant your hand so you're not planting it on wet paint and you're getting the control you want on the size brush you want. I know people who practice on scratch paper, or you just do enough paintings and you have to be relaxed enough, I think, when you're painting to just sort of let stuff like this happen. It took a while for me with watercolor to get this relaxed. That was definitely a challenge. At first, I tended to overwork everything and either make it too dark or try to add too much detail at the wrong times, so it would end up kind of smudgy. I was really proud of my first few dragons when I did them like 12 or 13 years ago in watercolor, because I had done dragons in many other mediums. And now I look back at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, not only can I paint so much better than that now, but I can draw dragons so much better too. Oh well. All right. And the trick is too, if your angle isn't right, you can rotate your painting. And this is really useful not just for dragons, but if you are painting anything aquatic, sea monsters, mermaids, fish, creatures, or just regular fish. It's great for doing scales and highlights on those things as well. And you could try to leave white either by using masking fluid or trying to leave white there when you're painting, but then you end up not getting paint colors that are as smooth. And I think it's much easier to add your highlights this way afterwards. You just have to get a really good bottle of white ink, and this one cost me about $6, and I will probably do at least 100 paintings with it, so Watercolor and ink and those things can seem expensive, but the few colors I use that are more expensive probably cost me, if I order them online, $13 or $14 for one tube of paint. But the thing is, that tube of paint will last me 3 or 4 years at doing 20 paintings a month. You don't use that much paint. So if you have a few special colors that cost more, that's okay as long as that paint's going to last. Most of the paint I use, I've mentioned this a couple times, is either koi, like the fish, or a brand called Shinhan. They're both Asian brands. They make beautiful colors. You can get big sets of them for 20 or 30 bucks. They're not crazy expensive, and I've used more expensive paints and they honestly don't get you much. So unless there's a few sort of exclusive colors that you really love, which I don't think I used any of on this. I think this is all just the Koi and Shinhan colors. You can actually do a lot for a pretty reasonable investment. I think the thing I spend the most on is paper, only because I do so many paintings. And even on the paper I use is, depending on the size, between $5 and $10 for 30 sheets. So considering that's 30 paintings, that's not that crazy. I'm just trying to make sure that this edge here stands out, because this is where the dragon is overlapping its own tail. I'm just going to use some of the white ink and really make sure that that stands out. Okay, now the question is, yep, that's dry. I thought it'd be fun to do all these crazy tropical looking blends for the body, and especially for the tail, to have all these kind of funky little colors going into kind of a reddish tail here. So, and like I said earlier, I usually do like big foofy feathery tails or furry tails on feather dragons, but with this one I thought it'd be cool to just kind of do more of a regular serpent tail and just really make it have a neat curl to it. And I've looked at a ton of live snakes and photos of snakes coiled around things, and that really helps when you're designing tails. If you ever want to do a dragon or serpent creature that is coiled around rocks or anything like that, definitely look up snakes coiled around things, because it will help you get like much more natural looking layouts for what your body of your creature is doing. So, like my lighting keeps changing in here, partly because I'm getting a little bit of lighting from outside in the sun, and that really changes. I have the curtain pulled, but it still does that a little bit. It changes what the lighting on my paper looks like. Now, are we zoomed all the way out? I think we are. I'm going to try to get the camera up a little more so you guys can see more or less the full finished painting here, if that works. It's a little tricky with my tripod here. There we go. And the last thing I have to do is sign it. I'm just debating what color I want to sign it in. I think I want to sign it in red. And I think I'm going to sign it inside the curve of the tail down here. And in this case, I'm just going to use my shorter signature because I don't need to distract too much from the painting, which is a way that I draw my initials kind of connected together. And then I usually add a number for the year. So in this case, it's going to be 20, which is a little harder to do in watercolor, but there we go. And there is the finished Pina Colada Inspired Tropical Dragon. It took about 2 hours and 45 minutes, plus probably 15 minutes of sketching, so it was about a 3-hour piece in total. Most of the time was spent doing the detail on the wings and the face. I think it came out pretty good. And I am happy that I was able to stream an entire painting without a break. That was pretty good, except for going to get a drink. I think I took a 2-minute break to get a drink while you're waiting for stuff to dry. So tomorrow I am going to be back streaming again, and we'll try to add some color to the pieces that I've been working on in ink the last couple days. We drew this fish mermaid cat, I guess mercat, yesterday, and I have this other cat here, which is known as the sourpuss. It's very cranky, and I think we'll mess around with adding some color to those tomorrow. I was originally going to do that today, but I wanted to do something a little different with some feathers and without those ink outlines. So you could do this with ink outlines. It would just have a more graphic comic book sort of look. But I like the softness of just doing it on watercolor paper and just doing the outlines in watercolor. So yay, we did the entire thing and we're all done. So I'm going to sign off and go feed my cats so they stop getting angry at me. And I hope I will see you guys again who have tuned in. We're repeating the stream later. And I hope you guys are having a good day and washing your hands and putting up with any social distancing requirements wherever you live and not getting too stressed out. Look at this nice, chill, tropical dragon. Relax. It's all okay. And I know waiting can be difficult, so hang in there. And I will be back tomorrow. Thank you.